Bucknutter. It is Thursday, February 2nd, 2017. I'm Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. We have essentially turned the page to a new year on the recruiting cycle. So who better to bring in than the Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong, still in Nashville, where he was at the headquarters for 24/7 Sports, sharing wisdom all day over many technological platforms. Steve, how are you this fine morning?
Good morning, Daniel. Doing great. Feeling great.
You were down there. You got a chance to take in everything. Now that Ohio State has put this class to bed, first, I must give Steve credit for those who are avid BM5-ish listeners. He said routinely for about the last 2.5 months that we were going to get a surprise commitment of no one we've ever heard of. Enter Elijah Gardner, so you win the prize. Talk about the stretch run here and then maybe kind of put the class in context as you see the Buckeyes going forward.
Well, nation's number 2 recruiting class. I think it's 3 guys ranked number 1 nationally at their position and like another 6 ranked number 2 nationally at their position. It's another class that keeps Ohio State in the national championship discussion for, when you're projecting down the road, in those 2018, 2019, 2020 seasons. This class, keeps Ohio State right where they want to be, right in contention. Across the board, Ohio State did fantastic, brought in one of America's top offensive line hauls, brought in an edge rusher in Chase Young that's got a chance to be to win all the college football awards at his position down the road. You brought in a young man in Baron Browning who could be an eventual Buckeyes Award winner. You bring in a loaded defensive back class led by Sean Wade, Jeffrey Okuda, and Kendall Sheffield. And all 3 of those guys have special trait. And at the running back position, you're bringing in a guy that's a freak athletically in J.K. Dobbins. And at the quarterback position, you're bringing in maybe the best high school football player in the country. So it's just another typical Ohio State class, but not one that you take for granted because the Buckeye staff works so hard on the trail to land these guys and ensure that they are going to Ohio State. And the amount of time that Ohio State staff spends on building relationships with these young men and building trust and getting these prospects to come to campus so they can then get around the Ohio State players. I think that's their favorite part is the Ohio State staff loves to get the recruits around their players because I think it's a coaching staff that for the most part is their players' coaches. And not everyone in college football is a player's coach, and that's all right. But at Ohio State, just the community feel, the way that they bring in the kids, the parents, how comfortable they make the parents of the players at Ohio State. So then now they're advocates for you. At some places, I know there's schools that are just excited now that they don't have to deal with the parents anymore because the kids signed on the dotted line. And I think that Ohio State embraces all that, and all those little details add up for them to land the type of recruiting classes they want to land. And they did it again. I mean, this is arguably the top class in the country. There's some other really good ones that you could make a case for. And average ranking per commit, Ohio State had pound for pound the best class this year. And it really is it remains an exciting time to be a Buckeyes fan. And then with Elijah Gardner, that just goes to show you how thorough the scouting is. Receiver's such an easy position to find a guy that you think you like. I mean, if you watch receiver film, there's so many good receivers. I mean, it's such a saturated position. And for Ohio State, they scoured the country to find Elijah Gardner, who had 2 offers, Houston and Missouri, and he was committed to Missouri. I mean, I'm sure they watched 100 guys before they watched Elijah Gardner. And then for them to key in on him, and that's the guy they wanted and went down there and saw him with Coach Meyer and then brought him back up. And I don't even know if that's a scenario. Maybe they just were out making the rounds and randomly walked in his school and they're like, holy I just almost dropped an expletive. This kid's really good, man. We need to recruit him. It could have worked out that way too, but for them to at least recognize that this is a guy that's got that potential rare ability, and he's so raw, but his upside's through the roof. That's just another credit to Ohio State and how they conduct business, because a lot of other schools taking guys late in the process, most oftentimes they're not going to be difference makers on the elite stage. And Elijah Gardner, he's a guy that not many people talk about, but you at least see the trait. You see the potential for him to not just be a good player, but an NFL guy. I mean, he's 6'5", 6". He's a big young man. I mean, you see that picture of him standing there with Urban Meyer and Kevin Wilson. Urban Meyer is a big dude, and Elijah Gardner had quite a few inches on him. And, Mickey Marotti and those guys are going to do something with that frame. And so exciting. I'm starting to ramble, but I can do that when I'm talking about the Buckeyes.
I got a question for you. So this has popped up on the boards a lot, and it just as a point of clarification. One of the reasons, or the primary reason, Ohio State didn't finish with the number one class was the number of guys in the class, and the rankings take into account some type of cumulative effect. But then there's a question on the boards about some of the teams taking 30, 29 commits. I believe Michigan took 30. I want to say Alabama took 29. Don't quote me on those, but I'm pretty sure that's close. Explain to the people, and then there's a rule you can only take 25. So explain to everybody. There's a lot of questions on the board about how they're able to do that. Nuts and bolts that for us.
Well, the first thing you got to take care of is you can only have 85 on scholarship heading into fall camp. So that's the very first number that a football team is balancing. And then from there, you're going to have some attrition in the spring. So I think you can go into the spring with maybe more than that, but it's a gamble. And I may be don't hold me to that, but I believe that to be true. So you're balancing your 85, and from there, if you can sign more than 25, because now if you're enrolling guys early, you can push them to the class before. So say you have 7 early enrollees, you can say 4 of them were part of that other class and 3 are part of this class. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's real. And so that's how you can do it. And so Michigan, they signed 30, but with the early enrollees, they still were able to make it. They were still able to make it happen because they just pushed guys to different windows.
Sounds kind of shady.
And the schools that don't, for whatever reason, that Michigan, they're going to have a lot of attrition from this past year's roster. Guys that are for sure not back and things of that nature. Ohio State did too. So I just wonder. I'm kind of confused why Ohio State was crunching numbers there with all the guys electing to leave early. But I don't keep up with those numbers. Bill and Alex and those guys would be better asked. I go based off the assumption that these college programs have been doing this for years, and never have I read a story that on July 31st a college coach was panicking because he had 86 on scholarship. So I know it'll come together. I will say this is interesting. I was talking to a college coach late Tuesday night that, he had worked at Georgia. He said there was a time at Georgia when, because of attrition and guys getting kicked off the team and things of that nature, that they were operating with 64 scholarships. And they weren't on probation. They weren't on probation. And then there was a team, there was another team that was on probation that still had 65 guys on scholarship. So, the depth in the program hurt, and then obviously Georgia wasn't finishing the way they wanted to finish. So, I think people take for granted how hard it is to keep your roster at 85, but I don't have enough info there. That just really surprised me, to hear that. And that was something I learned the other day.
Listen, recruiting isn't the most above-board business. We make our careers off of it, thankfully, but there's some shadiness that goes on there. Of course not at the Ohio State University.
There's tough decisions to be made at places, and Ohio State made some tough ones this cycle, with guys. And so it's a beast to stay at 85.
let's turn the page a little bit here. Like I said, when you're in school, you work on that school calendar. And when you're in recruiting, you kind of work on the recruiting calendar. So I consider this to be the beginning of the year. So we're going to have a ton of new names and even more new names this run around. This time last year, Ohio State had more guys in the mix. Right now, they have only commitments from Emory Jones, quarterback out of Georgia, Brian Sneed, stud running back out of Florida. Very interesting that I saw they were tweeting each other yesterday. They both were number 6 in high school. Emory Jones called dibs. Give me 3 guys that we're going to be talking about now, you think, for the rest of our Thursdays leading up to February of 2018.
Well, I think Jackson Carman will be one of the guys that gets the most conversation, just because he's, the number 1 player in Ohio and a 5-star offensive tackle that I think is going to take his time for this decision, but I'm not concerned where he's going to go. I'd be shocked if he went anywhere other than Ohio State. But you saw Nick Saban roll into his school. You saw Jimbo Fisher roll into his school over the latest evaluation period. So teams are going to take their swing at him, and he's going to listen. So we'll see. I think Zamir White and Lorenzo Lingard, those are, the top 2 running backs alongside Sneed that Ohio State's going to recruit the hell out of. And keep an eye on Dayton Dunbar running back Tavian Thomas. He's a guy that could potentially play for the Buckeyes. I know that he's a guy that I'm intrigued by and look forward to learning more about, and I'm sure he's on Ohio State's radar right now. And so him, Jalen Gill, of course, already has an offer, and he's a guy that's been around Ohio State a lot, and so they're going to recruit nationally. Jeremy Ruckert from New York, he's the top target and was recently back on campus, so.
They're going to get Jeremy Ruckert.
The receiver, Cameron Babb out of St. Louis, I think they'll get him, and he's a top target. Teron Vincent, the defensive tackle out of IMG Academy, he's a top target. That's just off the hoof. Taraja Mitchell, there's more than that, but those are the names that come to mind right now.
All right, let's finish with this. So you're down in, for those who don't know, the headquarters for 24/7 Sports is in Brentwood, Tennessee, a ritzy suburb of Nashville. And when you're down there among all the Southerners, do you get the vibe that Ohio State has a little bit more respect than they think of? I don't think the SEC types have a lot of respect for those outside the SEC. Do you get the vibe down there that Ohio State's a little bit different?
Well, being down here surrounded by Vanderbilt and Tennessee fans, I think they respect everybody. But there's no question that Ohio State is looked upon differently because they recruit at the quote-unquote SEC level, and people recognize that. And obviously, you got Urban Meyer. I think, yeah, absolutely. How could anyone not? USC gets the same kind of respect, even when they're not playing like USC traditionally. I think that you hear USC and you're like, oh, USC, it's got a different ring to it, in SEC country, and same with Ohio State.
Well, we appreciate Steve spending his time this morning. He put in a yeoman's work yesterday. I hope you guys all checked out Steve and the rest of the crew. It was fantastic. Steve will be around every Thursday, bring you knowledge on 2018 and beyond. Have a safe trip back to Indy, and have a good one, Bucknutters.
See you guys.